18 months ago, I was the leader of Walmart's Leadership Academy, which was, by all accounts, one of the most innovative and effective leader development programs around. We'd bring leaders, high potential leaders in from the business. We would engage them personally and professionally. We would deliver it in such a way that they were engaged, that they were connected with each other, and when they graduated, they went out and they delivered. We had ROI from the business results. We had ROI from promotion rates, double promotion rates that was outstanding. Senior executives loved it. They funded it. We had budget. Sound pretty good? You're like, yeah, sounds pretty good. I'm going to tell you the story now of how I killed that program and why. And it was very dear to my heart. I had moved my family from New York City to Arkansas. Woo! Right? Spent 5 years building this out. But there was one problem we had. You know, that probably sounded good. We got about 30 or 35 at the senior director level, which is right under our global officers at Walmart. We got about 30 or 35 people through a year. And that might sound good for a HiPo program, unless you work for Walmart. Walmart has like literally millions of people. So they're like, we love this, the executives, but we need it. We need more people, and we need it faster, because we can't get the effect. This is great what they're doing, but it's kind of a big ship. We need to make that happen. So we set on ourselves the design question of how do we scale Leadership Academy, but not dilute it, right? Because that's the real trick, isn't it? You can scale just about anything, but how do you do it without diluting it? So we used design thinking, which we had been teaching for a few years. And just to level set, we've heard a lot about a lot of these components and stuff over the past day and a half. At Walmart, we think of it as being human-centered, ultra-collaborative, and prototype-driven. For us, that means human-centered. We empathize with people, like talk to them, figure out what's going on. Then we actually choose and define the problem in a way that we make sure we have a problem that's a real problem, not one that we just think was important. Then we explore ideas. We get a bunch of like crazy people who don't think the same way as you do, don't look the same way as you do, and we talk about it, come up with ideas. We choose which one we're going to try out. Then we build a prototype, and we test it so we can learn. That's the whole idea. And by the way, the design thinking, I love that we now have a term for it, but we've been doing it for years. There have been different people, and you'll see quotes on these slides from Sam Walton. As we're trying to teach people at Walmart about design thinking, we always say, it's in our DNA, right? This is, if you look at what he did and the way he approached problems, this is the way it worked. So we went out and we talked to our stakeholders. We talked to high potential senior directors. We talked to the managers of those high potentials. We talked to HR partners. We heard some good stuff. We also heard some alarming stuff. Like, I'm managing my career in the dark while being headhunted from the outside. People talk more about me than to me. I was talking to some people at lunch today. We were talking about a lot of times people find out they were high potential during their exit interview, right? It's like, well, it doesn't really make sense. Anyway, we listened to that, but we also talked to their managers. What did they say? They were like, well, what are they learning? Is it relevant to the business? Why are they gone so long? I've got stuff to do, right? HR, too, said, that's great, but how many seats? I need more seats. You don't give me enough seats. The whole scaling issue, right? And the nominations process was a mess. How do we figure out who these people are and all this stuff? So we listened to all that, and we built, you heard this morning, customer journey maps, right? Or user journey. We had a journey map set up, and we put it in a public place so people could come by and they could look at it, and they could interact with it. We'd draw people in, be like, hey, what do you think about this? Or what are we missing? What do you think? I knew it was working when I was sitting in a meeting, totally different, and the guy next to me goes, hey, I was dreaming about your board last night. I was like, that's a little creepy, but that's awesome. Tell me what you got. And as we looked at this, and then we got into really understanding what the life cycle is for that high potential senior director, And we started to ideate ideas. One of the big ideas that came out as we looked at it was, do we really need a discrete program or a series of programs? Or should we just look at this like a journey? Because that's what, if you think about your life, yeah, there are moments punctuated that you learn things, like we talked about with Dan this morning, but it's also that linking those moments together is the journey that made you who you are today. So we said, all right, let's go for that. Let's look at that. So we built a prototype. And we basically said, let's focus on the learner. Let's start by, we'll assess them, not where they are now, but where they need to be. If we're building future officers, because that's what we want to be able to do with this people group, then we need to test them like they're officers so they know where they are and what their gaps are. Then they need to figure out a plan. And we're not going to do a plan by themselves for that journey. We're going to hook them up with their manager. And their manager together, we're going to come together and we're going to build out, hey, this is what I think your plan is. I want you to focus on this. I don't want you to focus on that. And have a conversation and work it out. Once you do that, then we need to do a little work to prepare you for this. One of the things we do is we surround them by a bunch of their peers, 7 or 8 folks who look different than them. So you've got that kind of diversity, but are also diverse in what they do, the function they work in, the segment they work within Walmart, the geography, where they are in the world. And the other thing we do in this part when we're preparing them is help them prepare their minds to develop themselves, right? All the things that I'm sure the people in here love, stuff like double loop learning and challenging their own assumptions, being able to find and create experiences for themselves, and then guiding how they process those through reflection and feedback. Once they've got that going, they're going to go. They're going to execute their plan together and alone. When it makes sense to be on their own, they'll be on their own. When it makes sense for some of them have similar needs, they should learn together. And then at the end, I say the end, but at the end of a cycle, at the end of the year, we assess again. Did we get behavior change? Did we get lasting behavior change? Did this work? But I did little air quotes for the end because it doesn't end. That assessment then drives the next plan for the next cycle. And then prepare and go. And there aren't seats, and this isn't a program. It's basically, if you're designated in this pool of Ready Now people, you are on this journey. So it starts by you getting notified, and then your manager comes together, and we do an orientation with a large group of them and say, hey, this is what expectations of you, expectations of your manager, what we expect. Then the assessments we're using are an officer level 360 and the Korn Ferry assessment of leadership potential. The output of that are needs that can go into a leader development plan, a personalized leader development plan for this individual. But they don't have to do that alone. We come alongside them. The manager, we call it Ascent, is what we're calling this approach. So we come by to help. We're Sherpas. I don't know. I put it forward, and people are like, you can't say that. We're like, well, it kind of stuck. So we have these meetings. You look, and sometimes the great thing in this meeting, sometimes it's, you don't need to do any of this stuff. You've got this initiative you're working on, and you've got this special project. That'll give you the exposure. This will work on your little piece. And sometimes it was all in the manager's head, right? They're like, oh, yeah, that's why I put you on that project. Well, you never told them that. You never told the individual that I wanted you to get this out of that. That's why I put you there. So the beauty of this is even just this conversation, if we didn't do anything else, would move the needle. So they have this conversation. Usually they pick a few things and create their plan. Once they have that, we connect them to each other with a digital platform where they can share ideas, share experiments that they're working on, connect with each other. We have a base camp where we bring in groups of about 40 to 50 together at once, and that's where there's 2 main things. It's that fusing of the cohort together, that 7 or 8 people, because throughout they're going to be the core of this experience. Again, not our idea. We got this we used those in Leadership Academy, and people came back and they said, whatever you do, don't do it with the cohorts. That networking and those relationships were key. But it's also where we kind of teach them how to teach themselves. The immersions class and experiences come off their plan. They go and have cohort check-ins throughout to make sure they have that accountability, that they're coming back with each other. And as they go through at the very end, again, the end of this cycle, the end of this year, they have an assessment again, an officer level 360 that's focused on those areas that they're working on. Because as I tell the participants, it's great. You can go through this and be like, this was amazing. I learned all this stuff. I saw these great speakers, life-changing. But if the people who you work with and the people who work for you haven't had a changed experience of leadership, of your leadership, then all of this is for naught. It's about really making you a better leader. So these are some of the lessons learned. We started this in, I guess, last summer. We connected, we now get people, we did away with nominations. We come straight from talent review. So in talent review each year, whoever's in high potential automatically get put in this. That shift from discrete programs to a journey has been seismic for a lot. We've been over a year doing this, and I'm still having learning and development or HR people saying, okay, so how many seats do we get this year? And, right? Because it's just ingrained. It's just a lot of patience and a lot of, okay, it's okay. We'll say it over again. Also. But maybe it's this idea that it's too good to be true. I don't know. So we take that. Other things we've learned, staying close to the business, listening and meeting their needs has been key. We had a lot of turmoil, I'll just tell you, this past year in our space in leader development. But staying close to the business and the needs of the business and answering those needs. So when my chain of command comes down and says, what are you doing? How are you doing this? I'm like, hey, Walmart US wants this. Sam's Club wants this. We've been talking to everybody. Building that coalition and making sure that you're providing an actual need to the business, I think has been key for us. A lot of the questions, because we're modeling this idea of design thinking and agile ways of working, and we're prototyping this, we don't have it all figured out. And we started before we had it all figured out. And we told our high potentials that we don't have it all figured out. And oh, by the way we're working is how we expect you to be working. So give us some feedback. You get a chance to really be a part of forging the leaders of the future. So they give us feedback, but also a lot of the questions they ask, we just put back on them. We say from the very beginning that their development is in their own hands. They drive their own development. We're here to provide experiences. We're here to support, do whatever you need. Some of that involves us creating immersion. Some of it involves finding a job shadow for someone or setting it up. But we also empower the business to create their own immersions. So the business is, if someone's need or a group of people going through Ascent, they need a merchandising immersion. I'm not going to come up with a merchandising, but I've got some merchants I know who are really smart, and they're going to build that immersion this year, right? Because that's where the expertise is, and it's development for them. And in the future, the people going through Ascent now will be the ones building that merchant. And guess what? Next year, the merchandising immersion will be totally different because it needs to be. It's not in a binder, but right now we're working to codify what's an immersion look like and how do you create them? How can we create a toolkit that we can export to different parts of the business? Last thing I'd say is just the challenge between balancing personalization with the needs of the business. That's been a really fun paradox to work with, and there are ways that we're finding to weave it in at different times so that on the one hand, an individual feels like I have the freedom to go after what I want to go after. But at the same time, the business gets to tell you, hey, this is what we know from external factors and technology and everything. We kind of need you to go in this lane this way. You can go out that a little bit, but at least you get to choose your route and how you go do it. Last thing I'd leave with you, go try stuff. Try stuff out. We hear about this design thinking and everything in the tech space a lot. You have a chance to try some stuff out. Because I think not everything's going to become a journey, but I think the future is definitely more continuous and more personalized development because that's the way our lives are. So thanks. Look forward to your questions.